Over the past 2 decades or so, we've been seeing almost every element of our lives lose more and more personality. Games, TV shows, movies, and books all feel like they've been reduced to a formula. Everything feels like it's being homogenized into one gray blob. Everything's trying to copy the other thing. Or they're just straight up remakes from something 40 years ago. The characters we see all feel flat, like cardboard cutouts just delivering didactic monologues, or just mouthpieces for a writer that wants to lecture you on how evil you are, rather than feeling like a representation of actual human life. Businesses want everything to be an algorithm or automatized, rather than run by a real human being. People are talking about removing the human from driving with self-driving cars. Everywhere we look, our culture has an antagonism toward independent thought and genuine connection. Whether it's a doctor that ignores you and just looks at the checkboxes on his clipboard, or music that's generated entirely by robots instead of actual human beings, our culture is missing the most important part of human existence: our humanity. Welcome to the channel, I'm Eric. I hope you get something out of this video because it's taken several weeks to make. If you think it's great, please leave a comment and leave a like and subscribe if you think you want to see more like it. If you think it's dumb, then please leave a comment saying so. I welcome criticism. And if you happen to be struggling to get over a toxic or narcissistic relationship, check out the link in the description below. I offer help to those who are struggling with that. I've been there myself, and I've spent years getting over it and helping others get over it. But now back to the video. I was watching an interview with Rory Sutherland, who is a marketing man and a behavioral psychologist, who was talking about how hotels are replacing doormen with robotic doors. Now, his point is different from mine in this video, but the reason I want to show you these two clips is because they do a very good job at showing how not only businesses, but people do not see the value of humans.
So what happens, you have a hotel and the hotel is a doorman, okay? And then they bring in like Accenture or somebody. And Accenture go, how much do you pay your doorman? You go, it costs, X thousand a year. We're going to define the role of the doorman as opening the door, and we're going to replace him with an automatic door opening mechanism. So we've effectively automated the process. And therefore you're going to be saving £60,000 a year once you've paid for our custom automatic door opening mechanism. And what we're doing all over the world is we're practicing micro efficiencies which lead to macro inefficiencies. Let me explain, because the actual role of the doorman goes way beyond opening the door. It's recognition, it's status, it's security, it's sharing gossip with other doormen about dodgy things that have been happening, it's hailing taxis, it's, opening taxi doors, it's doing loads and loads of things. In fact, opening the door is a relatively trivial part of the doorman's job. But what you want is you want a doorman who can extemporize, a doorman with agency, who can make judgments. And what you do in defining the role to make it effectively susceptible to automation, which is what most tech people do, they define every person's function in a way that makes it most readily amenable to being automated or being reduced to an algorithm or being reduced to code, okay? And as a consequence of that, what you destroy is 70% of the value of the doorman is his ability to make judgments as to what he should be doing at any given moment. And so you get rid of the doorman, you replace him with an automatic door. You think that's a brilliant cost saving. Everybody pats themselves on the back. And then 2 years later, the hotel rack rate's fallen off a cliff. There's a vagrant asleep in the doorway. And your most regular customers who really like Bob don't feel the same compulsion to stay at your hotel that they did when Bob said, "Hello, Mr. Sutherland, how are you doing?"
Technology is wonderful, and I don't want to give the impression that it's not, but it can never replace the human element. The physical opening of a door can be done by a machine, but the smile, the presence, the information only a veteran doorman of the area could give me, the connection with another consciousness, all these things cannot be automated by a machine. Now, Rory talks about something very similar in relation to customer service.
This is, by the way, what has happened with the very bad optimization of customer service. Customer-facing staff are now so individually monitored, okay, they're incapable of using any initiative. All they can do is follow rules. And so conversations with customer-facing staff are often useless because the value of customer service is in the ability to extemporize. Now, I'll give you an example of this, okay? So I had 2 successive failures of delivery to an Amazon locker. And I'm certainly not criticizing Amazon. They're very good at this by and large. Okay. So when the second time they tried to deliver to my local locker and said that they couldn't gain access to it, they then said, we're going to try again tomorrow. And I said, I don't want you to try again tomorrow because the same is going to happen all over again. And I'm getting sick of this. Can you just deliver to one of 7 other lockers or 5 other pickup points in Sevenoaks? Because I don't care where I pick it up from, right? I just chose this locker arbitrarily. Go and deliver it to another locker. No, we can't do that. Okay. So customer service is deteriorating because the constraints within which the people are operating are insufficient to handle any unusual requests. And, great hotels, understand this. I mean, you've got to be a pretty expensive hotel, but they actually allow the staff to extemporize and solve problems in a way that's specific to the situation. And the urge to turn every flaming thing into an algorithm is actually destroying businesses.
Rather than having people in customer service able to make their own decisions, businesses see it as efficient and beneficial to tie their hands, to make it impossible for these people in a customer service position to actually exercise their own judgment. To have everything streamlined and turned into a system that has independent judgment taken out of the picture. Businesses want things to run like one big machine where each employee is just a cog. Independent functioning doesn't fit into the picture. Now, these 2 examples apply to business, but this idea of turning everything into a system or an algorithm applies to so much more of our lives. Now, I'll talk about it more later, but we see the same thing when it comes to our media. Movies, TV shows, games, and books all feel like they've been made from the same Mad Libs formula. Just insert different names, different places, and you've got your next big hit. Everything feels unoriginal, inauthentic, homogenized, and lacking humanity. So why is this? Why is there this antagonism toward having humanity in our products, our businesses, our movies, and so much more of our lives? Well, let's dig a little deeper. What do we really mean when we say that something is unoriginal or lacking authenticity, or you feel like you're being shoved through a conveyor belt? What's the thing missing that makes you feel like you're actually being treated like a human being, or that you're an environment for humans? Think of a person. What makes them them and not someone else? It's all the things they choose to do. What they wear, how they walk, how they talk, how they treat other people, how they treat themselves, their views, their likes, their dislikes. And what's at root of all this is their value judgments, what they determine to be good or bad. And from this, that's where you get all these choices about what someone wants to have in their lives, what they like and what they dislike. Our actions imply explicitly or implicitly our value judgments. Whether it's our morning routines or our decision to go to war, whatever we do depends upon our judgment. I want this because it's good. Now that could be getting up early in the morning, having a workout and a good healthy breakfast will be good for, health and one's career. Or it could be that going to war is necessary to protect what you think is important. Or it could be that you want to protest that war because you think that it's an unjust war. Either way, all these things depend upon you making a value judgment. For someone to not have these kinds of judgments, to not act out in this way, would be a robotic, soulless husk. All our choices in life, our style of clothing, our style of music that we listen to, our dislike of modern customer service, to major life decisions like whether we choose to fight and die for what we believe in. All of these elements are what make you a human being, and at the root of it are your value judgments. And it's this very thing that our culture is removing from our lives.
What you destroy is 70% of the value of the doorman is his ability to make judgments as to what he should be doing at any given moment.
A man with clear connection to what he judges to be good and bad will have strong conviction. That's the kind of man who will stand and fight for what he believes in, whereas a man who lacks conviction will just shrug and conform. And it's the latter that we find so commonly today. That lethargic, apathetic, why bother attitude toward life, that feeling of what's the point, is all too common. The modern world is set up to erode that feeling inside of you that life is deeply important. In other words, that part of you that values, that cares. This is exactly why all the characters in our media for about the past 2 decades feel flat and lifeless. Modern characterization isn't about portraying someone who cares deeply about something, who's motivated by their values, but rather a bundle of political and ideological identities. This isn't how humans function, which is why those characters feel lifeless and robotic and flat. What's missing is a character choosing what they think is good or bad, but instead what we see is they're just like this intrinsically. The profound moral importance of making choices in life has been removed from our media. And this is what makes those characters feel like robots and not humans. Only a human can value things and make choices based on those values. You cannot automate this. Yet, that's exactly what people are trying to do today in our culture. As Rory explained, people are replacing doormen and customer service representatives with either robots or some predetermined system. The customer service rep can't use their own judgments in a situation to solve a problem. They have a script. People don't value a doorman doing things that only a human can do. They want a robot door. People want individual judgment to be replaced by a system, a robot, or some kind of algorithm that does that thinking for them. And this is the problem. I'll give a lot more examples of this later, but to give a quick one right now is you can really see this in how people are trying to remove the human from driving. They say it would be safer if all the cars didn't have a person driving them. The underlying premise here is that people are stupid, and things would be safer if you took the human out of the picture. That a human making decisions is the problem. In the West, nihilism has become the dominant view. It's entirely accepted that there is no truth, and that everything is just a matter of perspective, and that our choices and our values are entirely arbitrary. Our most respected thinkers are telling us that we don't really make choices in life, but are rather determined by some higher power, whether that's God or something that we don't understand. Humans today are seen as sacks of meat and hormones rather than thinking, valuing beings, and because of this, independent thought and judgment isn't valued in our culture, but instead, our culture values conformity and obedience. There's an antagonism toward independent thought, and that's why everything feels so inhuman today. And you can see this taking its effect on virtually every aspect of our lives. Since no one sees some kind of truth in which to build your beliefs and your life choices off of anymore, there's no common ground in which to understand different opinions and different beliefs anymore. People join into tribes in which you're either with them or against them. And you can really see this in the political climate these days. There's no ability to discuss or argue or be understanding. So if someone makes a judgment that's different from yours,
that's just like your opinion, man.
When you feel like your choices are arbitrary, then making those choices becomes a burden. No one wants to take on responsibilities anymore because it's a burden to them. This is why so many people resent having to work and resent having to earn a living. It's because making the difficult choices in life, like what you want to do with yourself, what job do you want, what career do you want, if it's all seen as arbitrary, then it becomes impossible to make that decision. And when it comes to things like the video games and movies in our lives, the people who make them aren't interested in diving into why humans behave the way that they do, or in exploring the incredible moral significance of our choices, but rather didactically telling us how you should live. The reason for them being good or bad, the choices that led them there, that's all irrelevant. What makes us human is that we are determined by our choices. But if you don't see any truth in which our choices can be based in, then the fact that we have a choice becomes a problem to be solved. Don't judge. We've all heard it a million times. Someone makes an observation of someone and everyone gets uncomfortable. Whether it's noticing someone's weight or how much they're drinking or the way they treat people, when you point it out, everyone will get uncomfortable and respond with, "Don't judge." People don't want these things pointed out. On the face of it, we think of this phrase as meaning don't be mean to people, or don't condemn someone as a person for something that's not that important. But there's actually a huge difference between condemnation and judgment. And it isn't a coincidence that people say don't judge me rather than don't condemn me. To make a judgment is really to just have an evaluation of something. You're seeing something as either good or bad or useful in some way in relation to human life. But people don't get angry when you evaluate the usefulness of a chair. They get angry at moral judgments, when you recognize whether or not it's healthy or good for you to drink heavily or eat yourself to death. So a judgment is simply recognizing whether that's good for you. A condemnation, on the other hand, is when you morally condemn someone, when you say that they're evil or wicked for doing something. Now, those two might seem like the same thing, but you can point something out as not being healthy while not condemning them, like telling your friend that you're concerned about how much they're drinking. So you might tell your friend out of concern, hey, I noticed you've been drinking a whole lot more than normal. Is everything okay? In order to have this concern, you need to first have the judgment of drinking heavily is not healthy for you. And also to have it in your mind that there's a reason why people drink heavily, is that there's usually something going on in their life that's troubling or difficult for them to deal with. So it's actually your judgment that makes it possible for you to have concern for your friend. You see that he's in a bad way and you want to be there to support him. But he gets angry and defensive and says, "Who are you to judge me?" Now, you weren't condemning him. You didn't pull him aside and say, "How dare you drink so much? You're a terrible person." What you were doing was pointing out something that he didn't want to see. He doesn't want to see how much he's drinking, and he definitely doesn't want to see the problem that has led him to drink, which is probably why he's drinking. And it's this mindset of not wanting to look at facts that make us uncomfortable that we see across our whole culture. It's not just that people don't want to be condemned, it's that they don't want you to see the facts that they don't want to see. Not wanting to deal with your own problems, not wanting to look at facts that make you uncomfortable, leads to a kind of fear of other people's observations, of other people's opinions. And it's this attitude that we're seeing all over our culture. It's this fear and paranoia of other people's opinions and observations that's really at the root of this whole dehumanizing of our world. And this will be a running theme in all the examples that I point out. So now I want to dive into a lot of examples of where we see this kind of phenomenon, of where we see humans having choice or a human making a judgment as being a problem. Something we see a lot of, especially in large organizations, is the desire to create systems that replace the need for individuals to think and make judgments. As Rory explained about the customer service world, rather than giving the rep the ability to make choices, they have a predetermined system that they all have to function within. When it comes to hiring for a job, people don't feel comfortable using their own judgments to weed out the people they don't want. Instead, they opt for a predetermined, widely accepted criteria to accept new hires. For instance, needing a college degree or prior experience. Now, obviously, needing certain criteria for a job makes sense. I mean, if you're hiring for an animation role, you'll want someone who can do that. Now, obviously, you'll need to weed out the people who don't have that skill set, but there's a lot more that goes into hiring. What about people with a bad attitude, or poor people skills, or those who would not fit into your work environment, or people who just have characteristics you don't want in your business? A lot of these kinds of judgments are pretty hard to make, and businesses don't want their hiring agents to make such open judgments like this because it opens them up to litigation. Instead of people being turned down from these jobs for, not having a good attitude or whatever, instead of hearing the criticism and agreeing with it or not agreeing with it and moving on, instead they sue, accusing them of being sexist or racist or ableist or somethingist, which of course blows up in the news and ruins their reputation. But if there's a system for hiring in place that most people accept and that most businesses utilize, then there's no one to blame. There's no individual person making an assessment of you being turned down from a job. If you can think that it's racist or sexist or whatever, but there is no individual person who made that call because it was all a predetermined criteria, a predetermined system. You can shake your hand at the system, but there's no one to go after directly. This makes businesses feel safe. At least this is the thought process. But the idea is the system is replacing an individual person's judgment because most people see that person making a judgment of who should be right for this job as an issue, as a problem, as a liability. When you go to the doctors with a problem, rather than the doctor looking at the actual facts of the problem, looking at you and listening to your histories with this problem, they instead look at their clipboard. All they see is their predetermined list of ailments and symptoms. If you try to tell them anything that contradicts what's on their clipboard, they politely tell you to shut up and that you're an idiot and that all you need to do is take some antibiotics and you'll be fine. But think of this. If the doctor was actually able to look at you, look at the problem, and prescribe what they thought was best for the situation, and it was wrong, that would put the doctor and the doctor's office and the hospital or whatever in a huge amount of risk of being sued. But if there's a predetermined, pre-approved system that all doctors and all patients have to go through, then you're safe. If it goes wrong, then, well, that's the risk. That was pre-approved risk. Doctors don't have to think or care, and in fact, they're encouraged not to do either. They just have to keep the assembly line going. The issue isn't Western medicine, but our culture's war on independent thought, which means an individual making a judgment about something. You can really see how people treat independent thought when it comes to how people approach opinions. Rather than having discussions and trying to figure out how humans should be living, we're all gathered up into little tribes and are waging war against each other. Each side wants to wipe out the opinions of the other side and homogenize everything. People have the attitude that you're either with us or against us. Try telling someone that you're not either left or right, that you have your own views and your own opinions. Rather than being interested in a new opinion or glad that you're not just going along with things, they get angry and mistrustful. The fact that you're trying to form your own opinions is a problem. Another example is how acceptable it's become to silence anyone else with another opinion. Public speakers are often run off college campuses by the opposition. People online threaten each other with violence, saying things like, anyone who believes this should be shot. Having a different opinion has become a threat. And when it comes to our media, I think it's very clear. Most forms of media today have become moralizing propaganda, rather than a human being trying to relate to you about life. To give an example, Victor Hugo and Dostoevsky were both Christians and from the 1800s. Yet anyone from any time can read their books and relate to them because they weren't just lecturing you about what they thought was right. They weren't just calling you evil because you weren't doing what they thought you should be doing, but instead showing you how vitally important certain values in life are. Even if you don't agree with the particular value they're talking about, you're still getting the emotional importance of caring about something in life, caring about life. And that's something modern media just doesn't have. Compare this to something like Captain Marvel or Dragon Age Veilguard. It's all trying to shove an opinion down your throat. This is the way it is, either accept it or you're evil. It's not about getting you to think or feel or relate to an important aspect of life, but just the opposite. Turn your brain off, believe what I tell you, or you'll be condemned as evil. We can see the same attitude in the rise of more controlling forms of government. People want the government to run more and more of our lives because they don't want individuals to be able to make their own decisions. They want more controls on businesses, more censorship on our media, more restrictions on what people can and can't do in life. And you can see why this is in the way that people talk about their own lives, particularly the younger generations. People see having to make decisions as a burden, and they see other people making decisions, like businessmen, as a threat. The opposite of a world full of independent, free-thinking people is a world of absolute control, and more people yearn for this kind of world. A world where no one has to think or feel or care. You can even see this kind of mentality, this war against individual judgment, in something as mundane as the way roads are designed. I've lived in Austin my whole life, and something I've started to see is that they've been removing left turn yields at intersections. The sign that says yield on green is still there, but they've turned off the green light. It's only a green arrow now. In other words, there is no yield anymore. They've turned that off. I can only go when everyone else has stopped. The ability for me to choose when I can go when there's oncoming traffic is just too much for me to handle, I guess. So that ability has been taken away. You can really hear this when people talk about road safety. The idea that if you're able to make your own judgments about how you drive and when to go and how fast to go, then that's unsafe. That's a problem. You being able to make your own decisions is a problem to be solved. And creating a system where your brain has to be turned off, that's safe. Something else we've seen is companies removing any kind of character or personality from their logos. Land O'Lakes removed the human because it's the safest thing for them to do. The depiction of a human is unsafe because someone made the judgment to show someone in particular. Showing us a native girl is a stereotype or whatever, so people morally condemn them. But if they had a white girl on there, then people would complain that they replaced the native girl with a white girl, and that would be racist. But what about a black girl? Then people would say that they didn't have a native girl or a white girl or an Asian girl. No. The safest thing to do is to remove the human entirely. So now instead of having a human face smiling back, instead of having a personality, there's nothing. Same goes with Aunt Jemima. People called them racist for having a black woman on there, so they took her off, which then led to people calling them racist for that. Either way, they were condemned. No one wants to stand by their judgments anymore, especially publicly, which is why businesses go to such great lengths to remove any kind of personality from their products. This is Conan's Pizza. They've been in Austin for decades. This is a good example of what most businesses don't do anymore. Painted on the front are Conan and Princess Yasmina, I think. But this is the kind of character and personality that no one creates anymore. No one has this kind of environment in their businesses anymore. Think of what McDonald's used to be compared to what it is today. It used to have color and character, whereas today it's sterile and polished of any kind of personality. And when it comes to having a woman painted on your wall, most businesses would never do this because they would be terrified of the complaints and accusations of sexism and who knows what else. When Kingdom Come Deliverance was in development, all the American journalists wanted to know about was, is it racially diverse? All they cared about was, is it compliant with modern doctrine? Good for Warhorse Studios for not caving in to the pressure. They made the game they wanted to make, and because of it, it's filled to the brim with personality and feels super genuine. You can really feel how authentic it is. But that authenticity would be destroyed if they had Aunt Jemima serving up some pancakes, because you know that they would have only done that to fulfill some ideological quota, not because it would have made the game good, not because it would have fit. Unlike most AAA games today, they feel manufactured to fulfill a criteria that has nothing to do with the actual product. The stories don't actually communicate anything authentic, but rather lecture you on how evil you are. The gameplay usually feels a lot like basically every other game out there. In other words, conservative and safe. This makes them feel totally inauthentic and forgettable. Or in the cases where they're telling you that you're evil, it's repulsive. Now compare this to older games. From the art direction to the content, they were overflowing with personality. Mass Effect and Morrowind had great stories that drew you in. Warcraft 3 also had an amazing story, but it also had a brand new take on how RTS games would feel and the gameplay and how you'd experience the story. It also had tons of characters in its world that felt relatable. In Daggerfall, you had something that no one would do today, which is attractive ladies dancing about.
The nude ladies continue to dance about. They dance and they dance for days on end.
In Fallout, you had some pretty wide range of choices, like using your wits to outsmart the master.
I don't think that I can
Continue.
to have done the things I have done
Nothing like these games come out today, at least not in the AAA world. The stories feel like they were churned out by a formula. They feel rehashed and unimaginative.
Where's the love?
I mean, Bethesda's decline from Morrowind to Starfield is a good example. There's an overwhelming level of didactic elements to modern games, just like you see in movies. It's not just with the stories where I feel like I'm being lectured to, but it's just baked into the whole world. Just look at Dragon Age Origins' Desire Demons versus the later versions, not to mention modern games' open war on beauty in general. People used to feel comfortable putting their personality out there, whereas today, they don't. We see that in basically every facet of life, whether it's big businesses or small, public life or personal, we are scared to put our judgments out there. People are minimizing it or outright removing it, and because of it, we're losing that humanity from our environments, our products, and our lives. The result of this is it makes everything around us feel mass-produced, lacking in passion, and just samey. And that has the effect of making all of our environments feel like they're lacking color and character. And that makes our lives feel that way. Now, a lot of people blame technology for the lack of humanity in modern life, but I don't. I don't think that technology is the source of this. In fact, technology is wildly beneficial for human life, but when technology is used to replace the human element, to function autonomously, to think and to care and to make their own judgments, that's where problems start to happen. Sure, the cameras that are used to make films are machines, but only a human can direct that camera to make shots that are meaningful. Sure, having a structure to storytelling is great, but creating a soulless formula just to be able to mass-produce movies that will sell only creates a soulless product. It only leads to stories that don't communicate anything authentic and characters that feel stale and flat. Only a human can give something humanity. Whether it's characters making certain choices in a story, or a game having attractive characters, or a hiring manager choosing to hire someone without prior experience, it's these choices in our lives, choices based on what we think is good or right, that make life colorful and full of personality. And it's this that we're seeing being removed from almost every aspect of our lives. I mean, if everything is systematized, automatized, pre-approved, and robotic, what's the point of even being alive at that point? The solution to this isn't to dedicate your life to changing the world. Holding a sign and screaming at strangers isn't going to make you happy. The only change that really matters is the change within yourself and your life. The whole world might be losing its humanity, but you can do a lot to bring humanity back into your life and your environment. You have a lot more control than you might think. As we talked about, your humanity is your value judgments, that part of you that says, I think this is good or this is bad. It's a part of you that drives you forward in life, the part of you that cares. And there are things you can start doing right now that are small but will help you emphasize this in your own life, that'll help you feel more alive and present. One way you can start to bring this out of yourself is to be more open, and to stand by what it is that you think and feel, to assert yourself in your own life. Nathaniel Branden, one of the best psychologists you can read, talks about self-assertiveness as one of the pillars of self-esteem. Self-assertiveness means the willingness to stand up for myself, to be who I am openly, to treat myself with respect in all human encounters. Now, this doesn't mean shoving your way to the front of the line or pushing people out of the way. It doesn't mean asserting yourself at the cost of others. It just means standing up for yourself, honoring your wants, your feelings, your needs, your values. It's all too often that we hide what we really think or feel out of fear of other people's condemnation of us. In today's world, people are so quick to attack you for what you think and feel. But if you let them keep you from being yourself, you're not taking ownership of your life. When you stand by what you think and feel, what you're doing is you're standing by the fact that you have the right to exist. And that is the very core of self-assertiveness. I know it can be scary to express yourself in today's world, but every time you let people keep you from being yourself, you're letting them keep you from living your own life. Something else that's really lost in today's dehumanized world is genuine connection. Doing something as simple as keeping eye contact when you're talking to someone can do a lot in asserting yourself and creating connection with someone. We look away from someone's eyes out of a feeling of inferiority or intimidation. The effect is we feel lesser than those around us, and we don't end up making a connection with people. We end up feeling isolated. Looking someone in the eye goes a long way in making you feel like you're representing yourself in your interactions. You'll feel more confident expressing yourself and being yourself. It's also the only way you can really feel connected with people. I mean, if you're just staring at your shoes or the wall, you're not really going to feel like you're making a connection with someone. And lastly, a huge part of what makes our lives feel gray and lacking personality is the media in today's culture. The art and media around us plays a huge part in how we feel about ourselves and our lives. Modern movies and TV shows have characters who are vacuous and stories with no plot or meaning. One of the best things you can do is to get away from modern media and start adding in older art into your life. Art that shows you characters that take life and their values seriously. This can go a long way in helping you feel that way about your own life. I find it extremely energizing to see the paintings on my walls every morning. I just get this feeling of, man, life is important. I have a guide that can get you started adding nourishing art into your life. Check it out in the description below. Well, if you've made it this far in the video, thank you very much for watching. I know this one's been pretty rambly, so let me know what you think about the style. If you think it's too rambly and kind of tedious to go through, then let me know. If you think it was great and I should do more of it, then let me know. Either way, if you want to see more stuff like it, be sure to hit that subscribe button and hit the like if you liked it. So thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.